Anna here from New Hampshire Community Supported Research. We are in the planning stages of our field season for next year. We are doing the needs assessment and goal setting that any good research program pursues before going out and trying to figure out what to research. So I'm an entomologist. I have 20 years of experience researching insect pests in agricultural systems, but I'm not an experienced grower. So I do need to revisit the grower guides, talk to people, see how they grow things, digging into the nitty gritty of standard practices, because a good research approach is always to understand what the standard is before going in and tinkering and finding new ways to fix old problems. So I figured great opportunity to make a video for the beginner, kind of start from the beginner point of view. I will be comparing and contrasting how commercial growers will make decisions in vegetable systems versus how a home gardener or a homesteader might make those decisions. I'm going to have more videos later that target a commercial audience, but this video is kind of for the home gardener or people who kind of just want to know how things are done on both stages. So I'm going to break this down into pre-planting stage, germination stage, vegetative growth, and harvest. But you can jump to those time points. All right, we are starting out with good old New England Vegetable Management Guide. I really like how they lay these things out. So we want to go to crops because we were growing beets and Swiss chard. Taking its sweet time to load. All right, so they have broken this down into disease control, insect control, weed control, but first start out with like really general stuff about temperature, some weird things you can see, some comments about soil. Here's some types and varieties that are used in commercial settings. These are really popular commercial varieties for different purposes. All right, looking at soil fertility, here's our recommendation for soil pH to be 6.5 to 6.8. That's ideal. You can play around with that. Alkaline soils are an issue with boron and manganese deficiency. So we're going to think about boron and manganese and knowing what that looks like. Knowing that if your pH is not right, it doesn't matter how much boron and manganese you add to your soil, it may not be available to your plants. So keep that in mind. That's why pH matters. High levels of nitrogen in relation to phosphorus and heavy leaf production and poor root development. So this will really matter if you're growing beets specifically. Like that might be a reason that the beet root doesn't get nice and fat at the end of the season. Of course, that doesn't matter if you're just growing Swiss chard, boron deficiency, cracking. So these are all things that we might consider. Here is a table for nitrogen requirements. So kind of a guide to how much nitrogen should be applied before and during. Side dressing is like applying it afterwards. So if you are growing on a square foot perspective, take this number 75 to 100 pounds per acre and divide it by 43,500 and however many square feet are in an acre to get your square foot or pounds per square foot or however you want to measure that. One thing that I will point out is that if you go to your local extension service, or if you have a private person do your soil tests, you're going to get back a lot of information about your soils. But it's not going to have nitrogen level in your soils, which that always stands out as like, oh, that's weird. Like, isn't that the most important one? Well, kind of. So the thing about nitrogen is it's really ephemeral. Those nitrogen levels, if you do like a snapshot measurement of what the nitrogen is in the soil, it'll change from day to day because it's based so much on temperature, moisture, what's going on with the soil microbiota, breaking things down. So it's actually really, really hard to get good information from a snapshot measurement. So these tables are kind of making an estimate about what you need over the season, kind of starting from zero. But we are seeing more things like these tables right here, where we're talking about nitrogen credits and thinking about what was on that ground beforehand. So grass sod, like if you think about you're tilling up a your lawn and making a garden, you're kind of starting with 20 to 40 pounds per acre. If you had some nitrogen fixing plants on that, it would be much, much more. Like that's, that's almost all you need for the season. You might also think about compost amendments in the same way. So you maybe applied compost the year before and that has broken down and provided you with a nitrogen credit. It's important to remember that not all composts are the same. So it's not really the same as fertilizer. So compost, not fertilizer, it can definitely, add soil nutrients to your soil. The organic matter in there really helps for a lot of different reasons, but compost is not fertilizer. All right, so I have literally just Googled beet seeds to see what comes up. I know that you certainly could start beets and chard inside and transplant them out to get over some of the problems that we're going to talk about when we talk about germination issues. But most commercial growers will direct seed their beets right into the soil. All right, so here we go. Lots of beautiful pictures. You could certainly pick out what beets you'd like based on what they look like. We see lots of different colors, like these stripy things. Beautiful. I love those golden beets. They're really, really delicious. Lots of different suppliers we're looking at: Burpee Seeds, Seed Savers, Stardew Valley. That's not a seed supplier. Lots of people talking about how to grow your beets. One important thing about beet seeds is that they are naturally multi-germ. So that each one of these little knobby little seed things actually contains as many as 6 seeds. There are a few lines that will be one seed in there, but they have been bred specifically for that, so you don't have to do as much thinning out later on. But almost all beet seeds are going to have multiple things. So you'll plant one seed in the ground and have a bunch of little seedlings come up. But let's take a look at burpee seeds. So a couple different things that you might look at. Golden beets, 3-color beet blend. These are all beautiful. Organic beet seeds. Something to keep in mind about organic beet seeds: if you are organic certified, it is a requirement for you to use organic seeds or make your best effort at using organic seeds. It's possible that the plants that you want to plant are not available, and that is part of organic certification. This is something you'd pay a little bit extra for. It's a cool thing to pay a little bit extra and support organic supplies, but there's not a lot of difference between organic seeds and seeds that are produced outside of. Here is a page from Johnny's. You'll see a lot of the same varieties that we're seeing in other suppliers. One thing I wanted to point out is that this is F1 beet seed. This is opposed to open pollinated. You might see OP. So OG here is indicating organic. OP is for open pollinated. F1 is specific to seeds that are the offspring of a hybrid cross, so a really controlled cross. The folks who are looking for the F1 seeds are looking for reproducibility, uniform roots. This is something that if you are growing commercially, you're looking for that for harvesting point of view. If you're a home grower, that doesn't really matter as much. It depends on how you look at it. The one point that you will see from Seed Savers is that if you grow these F1 seeds into plants and then try to produce seed from those plants, there's going to be a lot more variability in the offspring there than in the seeds that you purchased. So it's just a matter of genetic variability between the beets that grow from the seeds. So keep that in mind. In general, open pollinated seeds are going to be a little bit cheaper. It doesn't make them more or less delicious or more or less healthy. What can go wrong at the germination stage? Well, the very first thing that can go wrong is nothing happens, right? So you put your seeds in the ground, you put them at the right depth, you followed all the instructions on your seed packet, and nothing comes out. We're expecting a little sprout of seedlings coming out of those multi-germ seeds. Well, first things first, the soil temperature can indicate how long it takes for that germination to take place, right? So under prime conditions where the soil is like 55 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, it can take a couple weeks for those seeds to germinate. If the soil is a little bit cooler, it can take as much as 3 or 4 weeks. So keep that in mind. Another thing that can go wrong, if you're planting, especially if you're planting in cool, wet conditions of the spring or fall, is something we call damping off, right? So these are soil pathogens, like Pythium, Phytophthora. These are naturally occurring soil fungi that can infect seeds. They typically take advantage of cool, wet conditions. If the drainage is really good, you'll see less of that. So there's some environmental factors there, but something to keep in mind. You'll often hear that commercial growers will use seeds treated with fungicide if they have a problem with that. That's something that commercial growers will use. But generally, drainage is the solution. And of course, there's nothing stopping you from starting those seeds inside and transplanting them out. From a commercial point of view, I see most people direct seeding these crops, beets and Swiss chard, but nothing stopping you from transplanting them. So another thing that can go wrong, birds, right? That's definitely something we have to consider. They love going after seeds. I think it did give away that you're dealing with birds, as you just see a lot of patchiness coming up, which I guess damping off can look a little bit like that too. This is also a period of time where we might be concerned about seed corn maggot, which is a fly that will lay its eggs near seeds. The eggs hatch and they can do some damage to those seeds and small plants. I'm going to give you a content warning. If you don't like looking at flies or maggots or anything like that, I'm going to show some cool pictures now. All right, so if you do a quick search on who is doing the most research on root maggots, you're definitely seeing a lot of work in sugar beet production, which is a field crop. But we're just starting to get some really nice work coming from Cornell on seed corn maggot biology and management after some big investments made to find neonicotinoid alternatives, right? So New York State recently banned the use of neonicotinoid treated seeds in the state. I mentioned fungicide treatments either earlier for those seeds. So they have required that they remove those neonicotinoids that are added in there. They were really thinking about the environmental impacts of widespread use of neonics in large acreage field crops like field corn. Well, seed corn maggot is a key pest in corn as well as a myriad of other crops. So we get the knock-on effects of that policy change and the investments in research in the really cool stuff that's coming from Cornell, mostly from the Poveda lab. But we're just starting to get stuff. And we get including these really cool pictures of these flies. So this is the fly. And you can find more information here. It's kind of a nondescript fly. I mean, it's kind of hard to distinguish from other household flies as well as its cousins, the cabbage maggot and the onion maggot. It's hard for an expert like me to distinguish between those species. I think that's kind of varsity level stuff for the average person. See the crops at risk factors. They have a couple of comments about cultural controls. We know that those seed corn maggots really go after recently plowed fields because they cue into the smells from manure and decomposing organic material. Really cool stuff about when the damage can happen. Life cycle, there's multiple generations per year. They overwinter as pupae and then they emerge. So the cool thing about that, knowing that they are sitting in the soil as pupae, and we are most worried about protecting plants when these flies come out, is that there's a degree day model to predict that. So no matter what you use to protect your plants from these flies, you can put most of your efforts into a very distinct period of time based on degree days. I have a nice fact sheet from Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners. There's some pictures here about what damage can look like. So here's some seed corn maggot injury to bean. Now this damage probably happened when this little cotyledon stage was in the seed. So cotyledons, those little baby leaves, they are already formed in the seed and they just pop out, right? So this damage probably happened while that was a seed. And then, if you have some stunted plants, they're not doing well, and you pull them up and you find these little white maggots in the roots. Here's a pupae. This is a really good example of a spinach seedling that's being impacted by some kind of maggot. It might be seed corn maggot. It might be one of its cousins I mentioned before. Here's a picture of maggots in soy meal. So you can see that especially the seed corn maggot is really cued into just generic organic matter. And here they're talking about degree days and how to measure them, base 40. So, you could get your calculator out and take all those temperatures you're logging from your soil temperatures, or you can use this climate smart farming growing degree day calculator. So this is a nice little way to measure what's going on. I know that they are working on a tool for NUA. So they're taking this maggot tool and putting it into NUA, which if you're not familiar with NUA, they use real-time weather data that's actually collected on farms, right? So different from the weather data that's collected at, like, say, an airport or in the middle of a city where, temperatures are going to be a little bit warmer than they are out in a real farm setting. So stay tuned for this. I think they are taking the research that came from this paper right here and validating that and building a really nice predictive model for when you're most at risk for seed corn maggot. I think that paper said something like air temperatures might not be the best way to predict them, but luckily we collect soil temperatures in NUA too. So stay tuned, come and check that out. So we're in the vegetative stage of growth, which basically means your little baby plants have made it past a stage where they can defend themselves a little bit better to a lot of things. And you might even get to the place where you're ready to start harvesting leaves. A lot of these crops are grown to be harvested continually. So you're harvesting older leaves and you're going along like crazy. But you're starting to see spots. What are those spots? So I found a couple really nice fact sheets from the vegetable team over at Cornell. If you are going to find spots on your beet leaves, I bet you $1 it's going to be Cercospora leaf spot, which is caused by a fungal disease. This is quite a bad outbreak of what we're talking about, these freckles. If you think back to the last time you bought chard or beet greens at a farmer's market or something like that, you might have seen one or two little tiny one of these, just a little freckle. Nothing to worry about there. Actually, if you're buying that, there may not even be much fungi to worry about there. These are the result of an infection. This is the plant's response to infection. It will shut down the plant cells around there. So this is Cercospora. I think it's worth distinguishing between this disease and bacterial leaf spot, because this one is caused by a fungi and bacterial leaf spot is obviously caused by a bacterium. So your methods of control are going to be a little bit different. Obviously, when it comes to infection, your methods of control are preventative. There's nothing you can do once this happens. You can't make these go away. But if you see one showing up or you have a history of having something like this happen at your site, you're going to think about using fungicides. So how do you distinguish between this fungal disease and bacterial leaf spot? There's a couple things I'll walk you through. One thing that they talk about a lot is these spots will cross over leaf veins. So right here, you see a spot crossing over a leaf vein, crossing over a leaf vein. It's not limited by the veinal structures of those leaves. We're going to come back to that when we're comparing and contrasting with bacterial leaf spot. Here's some more. What's a pretty bad infection? If you zoom in to these lesions, you'll see these pseudostromas, these like little black pinhead-like structures. And if you get really nerdy, you might hear a plant diagnostic professional say, take that leaf inside and put it in a plastic bag. And so within a day or so, that nice humid environment of a plastic bag, you might see those conidia produced in the pseudostroma. So like those little black pinheads will burst forth with these conidia, which is another fungal structure. There's a zoom in on the canidia. And then there's a lot more information here about the disease cycle and what happens to those canidia. So we'll compare and contrast that to bacterial leaf spot, which this is another beautiful fact sheet. Thank you very much, vegetable team. Again, like here you go, you have spots in these leaves from a novice's point of view. It's spots on leaves. They look a lot the same. So like, let's see how we're going to distinguish between them. So they say black color of the lesions, puckering and deformation of the leaves around these systems, like these irregular growths, things like that. You're not gonna see those black pinheads when you zoom in. And also you'll see that almost all of these are limited by the veins. So you won't see those lesions cross over the leaf veins. And that's what we're talking about. I found another one. This is in sugar beets, but you're going to have some similar patterns. Cercospora leaf spot, these round lesions with tan centers and red marks, these black things. When you zoom in, that's a fungal pathogen. And here's bacterial leaf spot. Again, it's kind of hard to see the difference when they're young, but if you zoom in, you're going to have that dry brown surface without the black spots that you'll see on the fungal pathogen. Bacterial leaf spot is a little more rare than the fungal leaf spot, and this Cercospora leaf spot is so common that we even have a nice little model to take a look at to predict risk of Cercospora leaf spot infections. So if you're familiar with the disease triangle, you know you have to have a susceptible host, a pathogen, and the right conditions. So the fungi that cause Cercospora leaf spot are specific to beets and other plants in that family, Canopodia. That includes chard, that includes spinach, that can include some of the weeds you have to deal with, your pig weeds. But here's a nice little tool to say what kind of risk are you at. And so I think this is based on leaf wetness. I picked a month in May that they take the average conditions over the past 2 days and say, how much risk are you at? And this helps people applying preventative fungicides. You're not just going out there and applying fungicides every day to make sure that you're protecting your plants. You're really only protecting your plants when they are at risk. So there was a couple of days in May here, low risk that week, kind of going through the season. So June had some moderate risk days. That can be very helpful if you're trying to make decisions based on whether or not to use fungicides. And this is usually a choice that commercial growers make. If they have a history of infection, they're not going out and spraying just for no reason. They're saying, I have had it with this Cercospora that's been building up in my soil. I've done everything I can to reduce the inoculum. I'm going to spray preventative fungicides, and I'm going to use this tool to decide when to do it. So thank you very much for that model. That's cool. All right, another thing that you might see on your beet leaves or spinach or chard leaves is beet and spinach leaf miner. Another content warning for those of you who don't like seeing maggots and flies and things like that. I have some cool pictures for you. So you see this kind of tunneling and things like this. This is quite a severe case of leaf miner injury, but each of these little white lines was a beet miner maggot kind of tunneling through, and they're actually tunneling through both sides of that leaf. So it's quite a narrow space they're going through with their birth. They're eating through that. So if you pop that open, and actually I think there's a picture here of this is quite severe damage. If you pop that open, you can see like that's quite a mature larvae feeding in between each side of that spinach leaf. So that's why it makes it a leaf miner, very distinct damage. You can predict this kind of injury by scouting for eggs. These are quite small eggs. You can see that this is the rib of that leaf. So they're very small. They might be hard to see, but I feel like they stand out pretty well. White eggs on a dark background. They're almost always on the undersides of leaves. So in May or June, you might be going out and scouting on the undersides of your leaves to predict those. Otherwise, damage really isn't that severe. Like there's a few cases where you have a lot of stuff that looks like this. I don't know of a lot of situations where people are doing a lot for leaf miner, but I could be wrong. So please, is this something you want to see more research about? I definitely don't see a lot of research about these flies in particular. There's a little bit more work in other areas of the country and in other species that do the same damage in different crops. This is a different species out in Colorado that does similar stuff in spinach. It's more serious there, so there's some more research. There's a few leaf miners that impact ornamental crops that do a lot more, commercial damage. So there's just not a lot of research out there about it. It's a pretty nondescript fly. So let me know. Is this interesting to you? Do you want to know more about it? Is that a big problem? We're talking about harvest, what can go wrong during harvest or at that stage of growth. Obviously, if you're growing Swiss chard, you've already made it. Congratulations, you've been harvesting so far. You're harvesting the older leaves and letting the new ones grow. But we're talking about beetroot damage now. Another content warning, because there are going to be some animals in here you might want to look at. Now with beets, a lot of things can go wrong. I think one of the standout things for beginners is what I've Googled here is beets won't fatten up. I think this happens a lot. Maybe you haven't waited long enough. Maybe they're too crowded. Maybe they have a weird shape because the soil is weird or whatever. But a lot of the time, like this person who posted on r// vegetable gardening, it's really possible that there's too much nitrogen or not enough phosphorus. So this is the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus will really signal to the plant whether or not to put lots of leafy greens on versus putting energy into the roots. So getting that soil right at the beginning of the season, not putting too much nitrogen on throughout the season, making sure you have enough of that phosphorus in your soil. That's part of what could have caused this kind of thing. Another thing to think about is that some beet varieties are made specifically for the greens and they won't have fat beet roots, but you've probably picked out your seeds according to the beautiful beet roots. So a couple other things that can go wrong after you've harvested. One big one is certainly voles. I just wanted to put a cute little picture of how cute these voles are and as angry as they make you. Obviously, I think this is a pretty distinct damage. You'll see teeth marks on your beetroots, and that'll be a dead giveaway. It's a mammal, a vertebrate, but you'll definitely see holes. You'll see signs of vole damage in your garden. You might see a hole before you see this kind of damage. I think this picture, the beetroot was actually pulled into the hole, and they were eating it from the bottom. So they're usually doing damage below ground. Beet scab is another one that comes up, and this is one of those things where this common beet scab that you see in a lot of these pictures is something that is caused by a bacterium, but there's certainly other things that can cause scabs that are living in the soil. Beet zoning is something that was mentioned in the guide, which this picture right here is beet zoning, which is caused by high heat stress during the summer. It's funny because it looks a lot like, varieties that are bred specifically for that cool color. So take it for what you will. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's all up to you. Well, obviously I'm just scratching the surface. This is like the key pests and diseases that we see in the Northeast that affect bee crops and Swiss chard crops. Please let me know if you are seeing these things, if you want to know more. Expect to find more information here about how people manage these pests. There's going to be standalone videos on that. What kind of control methods are you using? Where would you like to see more data to back up your decision making? Leave a comment.